Islam has become a highly politicized issue throughout Europe, most notably so for the radical right. The populist radical right has been the most pervasive and successful new party family to emerge within post-World War II Europe, often forming coalition governments, as in the case in Denmark, Austria, Norway, Italy, Switzerland and the Netherlands, or using their considerable electoral and cultural clout to legitimize certain policy points. The Burka is a telling case study in the rise of Europe's new radical right. Firstly, one thing of interest is the more Europeanized approach of these parties in opposition to a perceived Islamic threat. Even highly regionalized parties such as the Italian Lega Nord and the Flemish Vlaams Belang have positioned themselves as protectors of a European Western identity, rather than parties fighting solely for the independence of their constituents. This trend can also be seen among nationalized parties too, who appeal towards a general notion of Europeanness and Islam's incompatibility with it. Philip de Winter, one of the leading members of Flemish regionalist party Vlaams Belang, said, "We are the defenders of Western civilization, with its two pillars, Judeo-Christianity and the heritage of ancient Greece." Roberto Calderoli of the also regionalist Italian Northern League or Lega Nord called for the formation of a new crusade to tackle an imperialist Islam. The recently deceased Danish People's Party MEP Mogens Kamre at a party conference in 2001 stated, "All Western countries are infiltrated by the Muslims, and some of them speak to us nicely while they wait to be many enough to have us removed." The point I'm making is thus, Islam, rather than presented as a national issue within this party family, is increasingly becoming one of international significance. Combating Islam isn't solely to protect the integrity of the nation state, but instead to preserve the very values that constitute Europeanness, gender equality and secularism. A lot of this anxiety became centered around the integrated veil or burqa. Analyzing every country in Europe would obviously make for an incredibly long video, so I'll focus on a few notable examples here. Switzerland, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, as well as a few briefer mentions. The SVP, or the Swiss People's Party, will get their video in the future. They are the largest party in the Federal Assembly and are mostly responsible for the Minaret ban, passed through a citizens' initiative in 2009. Important to note, Switzerland has the second lowest number of mosques per Muslim inhabitant in Europe. This is likely due to the government not providing finances to their construction, unlike, say, France or Britain. That there are so few mosques, comparatively speaking, in Switzerland is telling. This piece of legislation wasn't a reaction to minarets at every corner. In fact, there were only 4 in Switzerland. Rather, it can be seen as a reaction to a set of values seen as antithetical to Swiss life. The SVP's propaganda poster related to the law illustrates this, with a woman in a burqa in the foreground, and minarets displayed like pikes and aggressive symbols of domination. In 2013, things progressed further, with the canton of Ticino passing a law forbidding the wearing of the burqa in public. Again, all this despite only an estimated 100 women wearing the full burqa in the entire country, let alone Ticino. In one infamous but isolated incident, a woman was killed in Ticino's capital for refusing to wear the veil, but this can hardly account for an absolute banning. Giorgio Ghirinielli, the man who drew up the proposal, said its intention was to send a message to Islamic fundamentalism. Perhaps interesting to note, the strongest political bloc in Ticino is that of the SVP and the Ticino League, both of which are allied in the Federal Assembly and are nationalist and populist. The burqa ban in Ticino was first used to prosecute in July 2016. Now the country seems to be ever closer to a ban nationwide. The law proposed again by the SVP has gained narrow approval in the lower house of parliament. If supporters of the ban gain 100,000 signatures, a national referendum could be held on the issue. Walter Wobmann, an SVP politician, said the law aims to protect the dignity of women. That said, looking at other SVP propaganda posters, there's likely other motives at play. In 1975, covering of the face in public was outlawed in Italy. Italy is a country that has experienced a lot of political violence compared to its other Western neighbours. Murders and bombings both by communists and fascists weren't unheard of occurrences, and this law was drawn up in a response to domestic terrorism. Facial covering, though, is now being used with political salience for other means, notably in this case, Islam. The party of note in the Italian context is the Lega Nord, who exert control in regions to the north of the country. Lega Nord is a populist right-wing federalist party and have been able to influence legislation at the local level to the north of the country. An example being the town of Azzano Decimo, which now outlaws all facial covering, mentioning Islamic veils explicitly. The law passed in 2004 by Lega Nord member Enzo Bortolotti simply aims to reinvigorate the original 1970s law, although invocation of Islam was explicit. He stated, "I only want to protect my own culture." In 2010, in the city of Novara, part of the northern Piedmont region, the then Lega Nord mayor banned the burqa, and for the first time in Italy a fine was instituted. A Tunisian woman was required to pay over €400 when she refused to remove her veil for identification. In the region of Lombardy, currently governed under the regional presidency of Lega Nord politician Roberto Maroni, the burqa was banned in government offices and hospitals in 2015. This came in the wake of the Paris attacks and was purportedly put in place for security reasons. That said, Lega Nord has made its opinions on Islam very clear. On the 3rd of January 2017, Matteo Salvini, party leader, claimed Islam is a backward religion and not compatible with our society. Vlaams Blok were an older incarnation of Vlaams Belang. They were and are a Flemish separatist party, similar in many ways to the Lega Nord in that respect. The party was treated with a watertight cordon sanitaire and eventually came to be banned in 2004, only to reform under the name Vlaams Belang. The party has made considerable electoral gains consistently, and other parties have had to co-opt certain policy points to stay relevant. Antwerp is a Vlaams Belang stronghold, and the party does exceptionally well in local elections there, though always kept out of governments due to other parties forming coalitions for that purpose. Vlaams Blok had long proposed a burqa ban in Flemish territories, including Antwerp, and eventually establishment parties adopted the same policy. In 2005, a woman was fined for covering her face. By 2009, a national debate had begun, spearheaded by Philip de Winter of Vlaams Belang. De Winter stated that the veil was a propaganda weapon for the establishment of an Islamic society in Europe, and suggested the banning of all veils in schools. Cross and yarmulkes were to be exempt from this proposal, as neither, according to de Winter, are symbols of a political ideology aimed at implementing a theocratic society. Come 2010, a nationwide ban won near unanimous support in Parliament. Even the Green Party backed the motion, with one Green politician saying the burqa harms the social contract. Worries over Islam have been growing in the Netherlands for some time. Pim 4x quick political ascent and then assassination in 2002 on the grounds that he stoked a fear of Muslims proved a catalyst for this sentiment. Also, of course, of note is the murder of Theo van Gogh in 2004. The only political assassinations in recent Dutch history have been related to Islam. Debates on the veil soon ensued as they increasingly came to be known as a symbol of separation and the irreconcilability of Islam with Dutch culture. Since 2005, infamous politician of the PVV, Geert Wilders, has been pushing for a burqa ban, doing so through connecting the burqa with issues of national security and the dignity of women, dubbing the burqa an insult to everyone who believes in equal rights. The proposition was also backed with limited Liberal Party (VVD) support too, but failed to pass. The PVV then gained a newfound legitimacy in becoming kingmaker for a coalition government in 2010 and once again pushed the issue. It became incredibly close to passing, but the PVV dissolved the government over other concerns with Islam, that being Turkey's potential membership within the EU. The proposed law was thus scrapped again. This isn't to say the issue has solely been the domain of Mr. Wilders. The Christian Democratic Party endorsed a school's forceful removal of a student that refused to take off her niqab in 2003. Maria van der Herven, education minister of the time, advocated the banning of Muslim veiling in schools, arguing it conflicts with national values. In 2016, the PVV surged in the polls. The party can now claim to be the largest party in the country and are set to make huge gains in the 2017 election. In 2016, Dutch MPs backed a new bill to ban the burqa and niqab in public places, including hospitals, public transport and school. The politicians behind it are doing their best to present the bill as religiously neutral and aimed at facial covering in general rather than the veil specifically. This all seems a tad questionable, considering how pertinent the debate has been in the past and the gains Wilders has made in recent years, almost solely under an anti-Islam platform. France is a secular country. The word laïcité is uniquely French and is used to describe the complete separation of religion from government within the French Republican context. A law passed in 1905 formally separated the church from the state, and French laïcité was formally introduced into the Constitution of the Fifth Republic in 1946. A notable populist party for analysis here is obviously the Front National. The party has tended to draw from a base of anti-republicans, monarchists and strongly conservative Catholics who have tended to be unfavourable towards French secularism, believing the country should embrace its more Christian cultural roots. Thus, in 2007, when Jean-Marie Le Pen proposed outlawing the building of large mosques due to them threatening the Christian identity of the country, he was appealing to this support base. The basis for opposing Islam has been from two angles then, one from a Catholic perspective and the other from a secular one. The Front National have come to play on both perspectives, with the secular-oriented Marine Le Pen calling for the strengthening of the 1905 law to outlaw all public displays of religious devotion, including those of Jewish and Christian heritage. In 2004, then President of France, Jacques Chirac, managed to pass a law to restrict all ostentatious religious symbolism in schools. This wasn't exactly aimed at the burqa, but did ban the burqa, niqab and headscarves from schools. Smaller religious symbols were still allowed. This was done in the name of teacher impartiality and governmental secularism and wasn't exactly controversial. One poll found that 44% of Muslim girls were in favour of it. This doesn't mean that French laïcité inevitably means the banning of religious symbols. Interestingly, a completely different interpretation was put forward in the French-speaking Swiss canton of Geneva, who voted against the Swiss minaret ban on the basis of laïcité. Citizens of Geneva argued that the banning of religious symbols by the state was an act of conflating religion and state, and posited that the state was in no position to neither condone nor ban religious symbolism. Things intensified further in France with the ascension of Nicolas Sarkozy, who attempted to play both ends of the spectrum, reinvigorating France's Catholic identity, but also appealing to secularism, ultimately culminating in the banning of the burqa in 2011. At first, in 2007, Sarkozy called for a positive laïcité, which acknowledged France's Catholic roots and recognised the role religion has played in the formation of the French state. He even visited the Pope in the December of 2007 to signal his commitment. This was Sarkozy attempting to mobilise centre-right as well as far-right support for himself electorally. Whilst embracing a Catholic identity, he proceeded in 2009 to initiate a ban on the burqa and the niqab, claiming neither were welcome in France on the basis of gender equality and community cohesion. Sarkozy summoned a panel of 32 experts to discuss the feasibility of a nationwide ban. The panel concluded that the veil was a symbol of debasement and recommended the ban, stating, "The wearing of the full veil is a challenge to our republic. This is unacceptable. We must condemn this excess," again returning to the principle of French secularism. The ban was eventually passed in 2011, but it hasn't been without hitch and opposition. One French businessman vowed to pay all the fines accrued by the law and set aside €1 million to do so, making the law somewhat moot. On top of that, in 2013, riots ensued in a Parisian suburb after police asked to check the identity of a Muslim woman wearing the veil. Some police have even mentioned their reluctance to enforce the law for fears of an Islamic backlash. The law was even appealed to European courts, who in 2014 upheld it, asserting that the court was able to accept that the barrier against others by a veil concealing the face was perceived by the respondent state as breaching the right of others to live in a space of socialization, which made living together easier. Incidentally, all of this mirrors Front National rhetoric under Marine Le Pen, who had been arguing for the banning of all religious symbolism from the public sphere for precisely these very reasons. In terms of other nations around Europe, the UK has policies that allow schools to choose dress codes, and this could become intensified if UKIP continues gaining ground. The party has hinted at the possibility of a burqa ban in the past. Denmark in 2008 passed a law that banned all religious wear for judges in the name of impartiality. In 2010, the government, in coalition with the Danish People's Party, proposed a ban on the veil entirely, although this failed to pass. Bulgaria in 2016 banned the burqa entirely in a similar move to Belgium and France. In Germany, 8 states of 16 disallow Muslim teachers from wearing the hijab. However, some of these states do allow Christian clothing, making the legislation aimed at Islam explicitly. Recently in Germany, Angela Merkel has called for the implementation of a burqa ban whenever legally possible. Islam is becoming an increasingly politicized issue throughout Europe since the terror attacks of 9/11. Burqa bans can be seen as a response to that, but more so the result of populist parties taking the reins and increasing the salience of these issues. As their threats to, or contributions to, government have increased, so has the implementation of policy points. As their support around Europe increases, establishment parties will have no choice but to integrate these political ideas into their platforms further, or potentially face electoral defeats in the near future.